He wasn't supposed to be home that day, but when Frank Howard walked into the dining room and saw his 4 sons bowing their heads in prayer, he dropped his keys. Because the woman leading them was a stranger, and the peace in the room was something he hadn't felt in years. 3 years ago, the Howard house lost its light. Amanda Howard, wife, mother, the heart of everything, never made it home from the hospital. Since that day, no room in the house had known peace. Frank buried himself in work. The boys buried themselves in chaos. And God felt 1,000 miles away. Joshua, Luke, Joseph, and Robert, 4 little boys raised by nannies who never stayed long. Some left in tears. Some just disappeared in the night. Too much noise, too much grief, too many broken things no one knew how to fix. Frank wasn't heartless. He was just tired. Tired of coming home to a place that didn't feel like home anymore. Tired of pretending his success could cover the silence in his son's eyes. So when a deal overseas collapsed, and he boarded the next flight home 2 days early, he wasn't looking for a miracle, but one was already waiting in his dining room. Before we begin, make sure to click subscribe, like this video, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. I hope this story reminds you that when everything feels lost, God is still working. The rain had stopped just before sunrise, but inside the Howard estate the storm never really left. Through the wide glass windows the sky was still grey, the kind of grey that didn't bother to decide between day or night. It just hung there, quiet, heavy. Downstairs, the scent of strong coffee curled through the air, sharp, bitter, too early. Mrs. Dale, the house manager, stood at the edge of the foyer with her hands folded tight like she was bracing for impact. Frank Howard's black car pulled up the long driveway without warning. 2 days early, no driver, no call ahead. The front door opened, and there he was. Suit wrinkled, collar open, briefcase in one hand. The other hand still gripping his phone, locked in a call no longer happening. He looked tired, not the kind of tired a nap could fix, but the kind that lives behind the eyes. Mrs. Dale stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, I didn't expect you so soon." He gave a faint nod, not quite meeting her eyes. "Flight moved up," he muttered. "The Hong Kong deal fell apart. He stopped. Something in her face gave him pause. "What is it?" She hesitated, shifted, then said it quietly, the same way you break bad news at a hospital. "Another maid's gone." Frank's shoulders didn't even flinch. He just stood there, wet footprints forming beneath his shoes. "How long did this one last?" he asked, like he already knew the answer. 4 days. Silence. He glanced toward the staircase, then toward the hall where the boys usually were by now, yelling, running, slamming doors. But it was still. "Where are they?" Mrs. Dale hesitated again. "You may want to see for yourself." Frank set down his briefcase, walked down the hallway slowly, past the old family portraits still hanging in their gold frames. Amanda's smile followed him like sunlight in a memory, and then he stopped, right at the threshold of the dining room. His breath caught, not because it was chaotic, but because it wasn't. The table was set, not fancy, just enough. A simple meal, half served. 4 small boys sat at the table, heads bowed, hands folded, and at the head stood a young woman in a navy apron, her hands gently resting on the back of one child's chair. She was whispering something low, calm, steady, and the boys were listening. Frank didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood in the doorway, shoes still wet from the rain, and watched the moment unfold like he wasn't supposed to see it. His sons were praying, not fighting, not crying. The youngest, Robert, praying, peeked one eye open and caught sight of him. But he didn't call out. He just smiled, small, like he'd been waiting for his father to walk in and see this. The woman, the stranger, looked up too. Her eyes met Frank's. She didn't flinch, didn't explain. She just gave a quiet nod, the kind you give when you're not afraid of silence, when you've been through worse storms. Frank didn't know what to say. The air felt different, like something sacred had stepped into the room before him. He stepped back, almost instinctively, as if his presence might break the peace he hadn't earned. In all the years since Amanda died, he hadn't seen his boys sit still for anything, let alone bow their heads to God. And now, without warning, here they were, not in discipline, not in punishment, but in peace. He turned slowly, walked back down the hallway without a word. Mrs. Dale looked at him, uncertain. He paused beside her, voice low, almost broken. "Who is she?" The house manager smiled gently. "She said her name is Gloria, said she's just here, until the light comes back." The woman didn't ask for much. Just a week, no contract, no pay. Just a chance. When Gloria James first stepped through the doors of the Howard estate, the housekeeper had already made up her mind. She was polite, sure, but clearly too young, too underqualified, and far too soft-spoken to last in this place. Still, something about her felt different. She didn't carry much. Just a single duffel bag, a pair of worn shoes, and tucked inside the side pocket, a weathered, leather-bound Bible, creased at the corners like it had been opened more than it had been closed. She introduced herself with a calm smile. "My name's Gloria. I'm not here to fix anything. I'm just here until the light comes back." Mrs. Dale didn't argue. She was too tired to. The last 3 women had left without looking back. And the boys. They were already planning their next rebellion. Gloria found them that afternoon in the sunroom. Or rather, she found the evidence of them. Sofa cushions everywhere, dry cereal spilled across the rug, a broken picture frame turned face down on the windowsill. They didn't look up when she walked in, didn't greet her. Joshua, the eldest by 4 minutes, narrowed his eyes like a soldier sizing up a new threat. Joseph threw a ball at the wall without blinking. Luke was crouched under a chair, drawing something sharp in black marker across the floor tiles. And Robert, the quiet one, just watched her, like he'd already seen how this would end. She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. She just knelt and began picking up the cereal, one piece at a time. "Y'all can keep playing," she said softly. "I'm just cleaning up what I can." That was it. No scolding, no lectures, no desperate attempts to win their affection. Joshua smirked. "You're not going to yell?" Gloria looked up at him, her voice steady. "Why would I? I haven't earned the right to be listened to yet." He didn't know what to do with that. None of them did. That night, after the boys were upstairs, not asleep, but at least not destroying anything, Gloria walked the halls slowly. The lights were dim. The walls carried more silence than sound. She passed the family photos, Amanda's smile in everyone, past the piano no one touched anymore, past the locked door at the end of the hall, where Amanda's books still waited on a shelf behind dust and time. She paused, not to intrude, just to feel. Then kept walking. In the kitchen, Mrs. Dale found her folding cloth napkins by hand. "You don't have to do all this," she said. "They'll ruin it anyway." Gloria smiled. "They don't need perfect, just presence." She placed the napkins on the counter one by one, then turned toward the hallway. "Do they know about their mother?" she asked gently. Mrs. Dale blinked. "They were babies. And Frank, he doesn't talk about it." Gloria nodded, as if she'd expected that. She didn't push, didn't preach. She just whispered, almost to herself. "Children grieve too. They just don't always have the words." The next morning, the boys woke to the smell of warm cinnamon toast. Not burnt, not boxed, not from the staff kitchen. Real food. Made slowly. Joshua peeked into the dining room. The table was set. Nothing fancy, but neat. Beside each plate sat a hand-folded napkin and a little card, just their names, written in smooth, careful pen. No one had ever done that before, not even their father. They didn't say anything, but one by one they sat down. And across the hall Gloria watched without a word. She didn't tell them what to do. She just stood nearby, waiting to be needed. By day 3, the boys had decided. She was too calm, too quiet, too steady. That's how you could tell she was going to break. They just needed to give her a reason. Operation Spaghetti Sabotage, Joshua called it. The plan was simple, childish, chaotic, and brilliant in the way only grieving 7-year-olds could be. Step 1, switch the sugar and salt. Step 2, rubber snakes in the laundry basket. Step 3, Liam's personal favorite, tie her shoelaces together while she cooked dinner. Step 4, wait for the yelling. It always came. Always. The kitchen smelled like garlic and warm bread when they launched the plan. Eli had hidden the salt-sugar swap under a tea towel. Joseph had set the fake snakes perfectly. Luke hovered near the table, eyeing her shoes. And Gloria, she just hummed a soft tune, some old gospel melody none of them recognized, as she stirred the pot and moved around the kitchen like she'd been there her whole life. She didn't look nervous or suspicious. She looked peaceful. It was almost unsettling. Then, just before dinner, it all went off. Gloria scooped a heap of spaghetti onto the plates, sprinkled what she thought was parmesan, and the boys waited. Forks clinked. First bites were taken, and instantly, blech! Joshua spit it back into his napkin. Joseph started coughing. Eli wiped his tongue with the corner of the tablecloth. Even Robert, usually quiet, scrunched his face in betrayal. "Why is it salty cake?" he groaned. Gloria paused. She looked at the boys, then down at the salt container, then back to the boys, and for the first time, they saw her laugh, not a polite chuckle, a real laugh, light and full and completely unbothered. "Oh no," she said, holding her chest like the moment had caught her off guard. "I must have just made the worst spaghetti in Washington." Liam blinked. "You're not mad?" She wiped her hands on her apron, still smiling. "Where I grew up," she said, "salt was cheaper than sugar, so my mom used to do that on purpose. Saved a few dollars. Nobody died." The boys stared. "And the snakes," Joseph offered, glancing toward the laundry room. "Laundry's boring," she said with a wink. "Thanks for the excitement." Luke, halfway under the table, froze mid-lace tie. "And the shoes?" she added, looking down without moving. Luke's hands snapped back. The boys held their breath. Gloria bent slowly and untied her shoes. "I once tripped on a loose step and fell down the porch in front of my entire church," she said. "After that, I stopped being scared of falling. I just learned how to get up better." Then she did something no adult had done before. She sat down, right there on the kitchen floor, cross-legged like a kid. She looked at all of them, eyes soft, hands still, and said, very gently, "I know why you're testing me." They didn't answer, not one of them, but their silence said everything. She continued, "Because if I get angry, if I yell, if I quit, it means I never really cared in the first place." She leaned forward slightly, voice lower. "And when someone leaves after you've already lost too much, it just makes the pain louder, doesn't it?" Joseph swallowed hard. Gloria didn't cry. She didn't preach. She just nodded once and stood slowly. "I'm still here," she said softly, "if you'll have me." That night, the boys didn't sleep right away. They lingered in the hallway outside the kitchen, pretending to be thirsty, peeking around corners. They whispered about her, not plotting but wondering, asking questions they didn't know how to say out loud. Would she really stay? Would she leave like the others? Why did she look like she'd been hurt too? In the quiet, Gloria stood at the sink, washing dishes by hand. The lights were low. The house felt lighter. And upstairs, 4 little boys, for the first time in a long time, fell asleep without a single plan to push someone away. Frank hadn't told anyone he was coming home early, not even the driver. He'd taken a cab from the airport, sitting in silence the whole ride. The business deal in Hong Kong had fallen apart in less than 48 hours. He'd tried to pretend he was angry, at the board at the numbers. But truthfully, it felt like a relief. It gave him an excuse to come home. He hadn't slept much on the plane. He kept thinking about the last nanny, how young she was, how overwhelmed she'd looked, even on day 1. He didn't blame her. This house swallowed people, and his sons. They didn't even flinch anymore when someone left. They'd stopped asking why, stopped saying goodbye. They'd just adjusted. He hated that most of all. The sun was still high when he stepped through the front door. The house was unusually quiet. No screaming, no broken glass, no rushed footsteps. Mrs. Dale looked up from the entryway. She opened her mouth to speak, but he raised a hand gently as if to say, "Not yet." His shoes echoed down the hall, and when he turned the corner into the dining room, he stopped breathing. The table was set, not formal, just neat. Plates, water glasses, a basket of warm bread at the center, and his 4 sons were sitting. Still, hands folded, heads bowed, praying. A soft voice carried over the table, not rushed, not rehearsed, just warm, steady, alive. "Thank you, God, for this day, for the food, and for each other." At the head of the table stood a woman he didn't know, young, calm. She rested one hand lightly on the back of Robert's chair, gently guiding his folded hands. She wasn't giving orders, she was leading with presence. The boys said Amen, almost in sync. Joshua peeked up first, then Joseph. They didn't see him yet, but Frank couldn't move. He didn't know what hit harder, the sight of his children finally at peace, or the ache of realizing he hadn't been the one to give it to them. Gloria looked up. Their eyes met. She didn't flinch, didn't rush to introduce herself, didn't panic. She just gave a slow, respectful nod, the kind you give a grieving man who's walked into something holy. Frank felt his throat tighten. He reached for the back of a nearby chair, steadying himself. His voice never came. The boys noticed him then. Luke sat up straighter. Joseph froze with a piece of bread in his hand. Even Joshua looked unsure. But Robert, the quiet one. "Hi, Daddy." He smiled. Frank opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He gave the smallest nod back. "Hey, buddy." It came out like a whisper. He sat down slowly at the table. Not because he planned to, but because he couldn't not. Gloria stepped back, letting him sit without pressure. She didn't ask if he wanted dinner, didn't comment on the silence. She simply picked up the pitcher of water and refilled each glass without a word. Her quietness wasn't empty. It was intentional. Like she understood that this moment wasn't hers to narrate. It was theirs. And it had been waiting a long time to happen. As they ate, Frank barely tasted anything. His fork moved, his eyes scanned his sons, but his mind was somewhere else. He watched the way Joseph leaned into Gloria's side, the way Luke passed the butter without being asked, the way Robert hummed a little tune under his breath, happy. They didn't look like strangers to her. They looked like boys who finally had room to exhale. And for the first time in 3 years, Frank didn't feel like the man at the head of the table. He felt like the one who had just been invited back to it. The vase shattered just after sunset. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just one sharp crack. And then silence. It had sat on the hallway console table since before Amanda died. Tall, hand-blown glass with soft blue edges that caught the light in the late afternoon. It was her favorite. The boys had been playing tag again even after Gloria asked them to keep it calm. Joseph, always the fastest, rounded the corner too tight, slipped, and his elbow caught the edge of the vase. By the time Gloria reached the hall, it was already in pieces. The boys stood frozen, breathless. Joshua's face went pale. Luke's lips parted like he wanted to blame someone. Anyone. Robert clutched the hem of Gloria's apron, but it was Joseph who looked the most broken, his eyes filled with panic, his shoulders trembling. "I didn't mean to—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Frank stepped into the hallway seconds later. He saw the glass, the boys, Gloria kneeling, and for the first time in a long time, everything inside him wanted to explode. Not because of the vase, but because of what it meant. It was Amanda's, the last one she'd bought. He remembered the day she brought it home from a small art market near the pier, said it reminded her of the ocean, said it made the house feel softer. He hadn't touched it in 3 years, and now it was gone. Joseph looked up, eyes wide, terrified. "Dad, I wasn't trying—" Frank opened his mouth, but Gloria spoke first. She reached for one of the larger pieces of glass and held it up carefully. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "What makes it special," she said, "isn't that it was perfect, but that it held memories." She turned the glass in the light, the broken edge catching gold from the hallway lamp. "And memories don't break," she added. "They stay, even when the things around them don't." Frank stared at her. No anger, no reply, just stillness. Then he turned and walked away. That night, the storm rolled in around midnight. Not just rain, thunder. Heavy, wild, wind-driven rain that whipped against the tall windows and made the old trees moan. The lights flickered once, then again, then went out. Gloria was in the kitchen, folding dish towels by candlelight. She heard it before she saw it, the soft shuffle of feet down the stairs, bare soles on cold tile. Joshua was holding a flashlight. Joseph had his arms wrapped tight around his own ribs. Luke looked small again. Robert clung to the edge of Gloria's cardigan without a word. Gloria knelt. "Did the thunder scare you?" she asked gently. "No," Joseph whispered. "But the last time it stormed like this, Mum died." The sentence dropped like a pebble in still water. No drama, no crying, just truth. Gloria nodded slowly, then stood and lit another candle. "Come on," she said, "let's bring the stars inside." The boys followed her through the dark halls. She lit candles in every room, soft, glowing one by one. She wrapped the boys in warm blankets, sat them on the living room floor and began to tell them a story. Not from a book, from memory, about stars you can't see until it's dark, about how God sometimes lets the night fall, so we'll know what to look for. Frank stood in the hallway again, not moving, not speaking, just watching. The flicker of candles, the sound of Gloria's voice, the stillness in his sons' faces. And he said it, not out loud, but in his own chest. She brought the light back. The house had gone still again, not the cold kind of stillness Frank had grown used to, but a warmer kind, like something had settled in, or someone. He'd stopped asking the staff for updates, stopped hovering, stopped questioning why the boys were no longer breaking furniture or climbing shelves just to be seen. Instead, he started listening, to laughter, to music drifting from the piano room, to the sound of 4 small chairs being pulled out at the same time for dinner. It unnerved him, not because it was wrong, but because it hadn't come from him. One night, long after the boys had gone to sleep, Frank walked past the den on his way upstairs. He paused. The door was cracked open just enough to see the lamp inside, and Gloria, kneeling on the carpet, folding laundry by hand. He watched her for a moment, the way she worked slowly, methodically, with care, like even the smallest act deserved quiet attention. He stepped inside. She looked up, didn't startle, didn't rush to stand. She simply sat back on her heels and offered a small smile. "Couldn't sleep." Frank shrugged. "Didn't try." He moved to the armchair across from her, rubbing the back of his neck. The silence stretched long, not awkward, just full. He finally broke it. "They're different now," he said. "Not a question, just a truth." Gloria nodded, folding another towel. "They're healing." Frank swallowed. "How?" His voice cracked at the edge of the word, like he was afraid to ask, or afraid of the answer. Gloria didn't look at him when she replied. Her fingers kept working the fold, but her voice was steady. "I listen," she said. "I sit with their pain. I don't try to replace it. I just don't leave." Frank leaned forward, elbows on knees. His next words came out slower, lower. "You weren't sent by any agency. Dale didn't run a background check. You just showed up." She nodded again. "You're right." "So why?" His tone was sharp now, tighter, not accusing, but close. "Why take this job? Why walk into a house like this, with 4 grieving kids and a man who's barely holding it together?" Gloria stopped folding. Her hands rested flat on the towel, and for the first time since she arrived, she looked tired, not physically. Soul tired. She looked at him. "I had a little brother," she said quietly. His name was Miles. Frank blinked, caught off guard. She continued before he could speak. I raised him while our mum worked double shifts. We used to eat on the floor because we didn't have a table. He was the brightest thing I'd ever known. Her voice shook just slightly. He was 8 when we lost him. Frank sat back. The room suddenly felt too still. What happened? Wrong place. Wrong time. She swallowed hard. Gunfire outside the corner store. A fight that wasn't his. He didn't make it home. She looked down. For a long time, I thought I died with him. A pause. But then I realized, if I let God use that grief, if I let him work through it, maybe someone else wouldn't have to walk through their dark alone. Her words hung in the air. Heavy. True. Frank didn't speak. In all the boardrooms, all the skyscrapers, all the interviews with men in suits and women with perfect resumes, he had never heard anything like that. He stared at the woman across from him, folding laundry under the soft light of a house she hadn't been invited to save, and for the first time he didn't see a maid. He saw someone who understood pain, but chose love anyway. He wanted to say something, anything, but all he managed was, "Why are you still here?" Gloria folded the last towel, then looked him straight in the eyes, because someone had to stay until the light came back. The next morning, the house moved slowly, not because anyone was tired, but because something unspoken had settled into the air. Frank didn't come down for breakfast. Mrs. Dale said he was still in his study, door closed, phone off. Gloria didn't ask questions. She simply made oatmeal the way Robert liked it, not too hot with one swirl of honey, set out toast and jam, folded napkins. The boys came down one by one, quiet, cautious, not because they were afraid, because they'd heard something in the night. And even if they didn't have the words for it, they felt it too. Something was shifting. Later that morning, Gloria found Joseph sitting alone in the library. He was flipping through a photo album he'd pulled from the low shelf, one of the few they still kept out. Amanda's handwriting looped along the edge of the pages. He didn't look up when Gloria sat beside him. "That's my mum," he said softly, tapping the picture. "I remember her singing in this one. We were in the garden. She had dirt on her nose." Gloria smiled. "She looks kind." Joseph nodded. "She smelled like oranges and books." He paused, then glanced up. His voice came quieter. "Is it okay to love someone else too?" Gloria didn't rush her answer. She looked at the photo, then at the boy beside her. "Love doesn't replace anyone," she said. "It remembers them by how we live. It grows, even when we're still healing." Joseph sat with that for a long moment, then leaned into her side, not for a hug, just to be close. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. The boys were in the kitchen, supposedly doing homework, though more sugar had made it into their mouths than onto any page. Gloria was helping Robert sound out simple words when Joshua stood up, cleared his throat like a teacher, and said, "We had a vote." Gloria blinked. "Oh?" Luke stepped forward next. "About you." Gloria looked around the table, all 4 of them suddenly serious, almost nervous. Joseph shifted in his chair. Robert stared at his hands. Finally, Joshua said it. "We know you're not going to be here forever. But until you go," he swallowed, "can we call you Aunt Gloria?" The room stilled, not with tension, but with something tender, fragile. Gloria looked at each of them. Joshua, brave but softening. Luke, hiding emotion behind a smirk. Joseph, still carrying too much in his chest. Robert, already smiling just a little. She didn't cry, she didn't hug them. She just whispered, "I'd be honored." That night, Frank came downstairs for dinner. He didn't expect anything to be different. But when he reached the dining room, he stopped again. Not because the boys were seated, not because Gloria was there, but because there was a 5th chair. They'd set a place for him, not at the head, not separate, just beside them, and in front of each plate a new name card. One said Joshua, one said Joseph, one said Luke, one said Robert, "And one, written in messy, careful crayon," said Aunt Gloria. Frank sat down without a word. Halfway through the meal, Robert leaned toward Gloria and tugged her sleeve. His voice was quiet. "Can you sit next to Daddy tomorrow too? So it feels like we're a real family." Frank froze. Gloria's hand stilled mid-cut. She looked at the child, then at the man, then nodded once. "I'd like that." The next morning, the boys hung a small cardboard sign on the guest room door. Hand-drawn, lopsided. "Aunt Gloria's room." And for the first time since Amanda's death, someone stayed. The first true sunlight in weeks spilled through the tall windows. Not the kind that slips past unnoticed, but the kind that makes you stop mid-step. Golden, soft, alive. Gloria was in the garden with the boys that morning. It had rained the night before, and the soil was still dark with water. The twins were elbow-deep in dirt, planting tulip bulbs with too much enthusiasm and not enough direction. Robert wandered nearby, pressing his palm into puddles just to watch the ripples. And Joshua, he had a camera in his hand. It was Amanda's old Polaroid. No one had used it in years. "Smile," he called, lifting it toward Gloria. She didn't pose, didn't fix her hair. She just turned, dirt on her cheek, and smiled the way someone does when they're home, but still don't quite believe it. The photo slid out with a soft whir. Frank found it that night. He had gone into the kitchen to pour himself a drink. It had been a long day of calls and meetings, all of it suddenly feeling less important than it used to. He saw the photo pinned to the fridge with a magnet. It stopped him cold. Gloria, in the garden, his sons around her, and they were smiling, not just happy, whole. He stood there for a long time, one hand still on the fridge door, the other gently touching the edge of the photo. No suits, no silence, just warmth. It felt like a memory he hadn't lived, but somehow still belonged to. That weekend, he called for dinner. Not a formal one. No staff, no suits, no long speeches. Just the dining room. The 6 of them. Plates passed hand to hand, laughter spilling through the cracks. There was music playing quietly in the background, a playlist Amanda used to put on during Sunday meals. Gloria recognized it. Her eyes flickered toward Frank, but she didn't say anything. She didn't need to. After dinner, when the boys had run off to race toy cars down the hallway, Frank cleared his throat. He hadn't practiced what he was about to say. He just felt it was time. He looked across the table at Gloria, the woman who had entered his house with a single bag and no reason to stay. And he said, "You didn't just take care of them." His voice was low, sincere. "You brought peace into a house that forgot what it looked like." Gloria didn't speak. She just listened. "I thought the only way to survive this much loss," Frank continued, "was to stay busy enough not to feel it." A pause. "But you let them feel. You let me feel. Without pushing, without fixing." He exhaled, looked down. When he looked up again, his eyes were glassy. "I'm not asking you to be their mother. I'm not even asking you to stay in that guest room." Another breath. "I'm asking if you'd stay not as staff, not as a visitor, but as someone who helps this house stay warm. No proposal like in the movies. No flowers or candlelight. Just a man, grieving, flawed, quietly healing, asking someone to stay." Gloria's answer was a whisper. "I'll stay, but only if I'm part of the family." That night, when the boys passed her room on the way to bed, they saw a new sign taped over the old one. It still said, "Aunt Gloria's room," but underneath, in Joshua's handwriting, someone had added, "Family lives here." Spring came slowly that year. The trees bloomed late, the skies still held patches of grey, but the garden behind the Howard estate began to wake anyway, inch by inch, just like everything else in that house. It started with the tulips, Amanda's favourite. Gloria found the bulbs buried in a dusty box in the tool shed, labelled in her handwriting, "Plant these for the boys when they're ready." No one said it, but everyone knew what it meant. They were ready now. One quiet Saturday, they all gathered in the garden. Gloria wore her old gardening gloves. Joshua had dirt on his nose before the first hole was even dug. Joseph and Luke argued about where the yellow tulips should go. Robert walked carefully, holding each bulb like it was made of glass. And Frank? He stood at the edge for a moment, watching. Then he stepped forward, picked up the small shovel, and began to dig beside his sons. Not as their boss, not as the man with the most answers, just as their dad. After the last bulb was placed, Gloria suggested something simple. Maybe we each say one thing we remember about her. The boys hesitated, not because they didn't want to, but because saying her name out loud still felt like holding fire. Joshua spoke first. She used to sing in the kitchen. Really bad. He smiled. But she thought she sounded like Beyoncé. Laughter. Luke added, she let us eat cereal for dinner when Dad was on trips. Joseph said, she called me her little hurricane. And Robert, his voice barely above a whisper, she prayed with me when I was scared. The wind stirred just then, not loud, but present, like it was listening. Frank swallowed hard, looked down at his hands, still covered in dirt. She was the light in every room, he said quietly, and I didn't know how to live without her. A pause. But now, I think I'm learning. He looked at Gloria, not to replace Amanda, not to erase her, just to say, thank you for helping me remember how to live again. Later that afternoon, as the boys played with their new puppy, a golden retriever named Moses, who barked at butterflies and licked everything that moved, Gloria and Frank sat on the back steps of the house, not touching, not speaking at first, just watching. The garden was blooming, not perfectly. Some tulips bent sideways, others poked through uneven patches, but they were alive. So was the laughter, the warmth, the sound of something restored. Frank exhaled. I used to think healing came in big moments, he said. Therapists, schools, travel, control. He paused. But I think healing came in bowls of spaghetti and shoelaces tied together and candles in the dark. Gloria smiled, not at him, but at the boys chasing each other barefoot through wet grass. They just needed someone who wouldn't leave when things got hard, she said, then added softly, so did you. Frank turned to her. His voice was steady now, grateful, new. You stayed. Gloria looked at him, eyes warm. I always said I would, until the light came back. She nodded toward the garden, toward the house, toward the 4 boys now calling for her to come help name a worm they'd found in the flower bed. I think it's back now. 1 year later, the photo sits framed on the piano. 6 people, not 5. A family. The garden is wild and bright. The house is loud again, but with music, not chaos. And every evening before dinner, 4 boys and 1 woman fold their hands. They thank God for the food, for the love that never left, and for the miracle of someone who stayed long enough to help them see it again. The light came back. And this time, it stayed. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that no pain is wasted, and that love, real love, knows how to stay, then you belong here. This is Elevated Heart Stories, a home for stories that don't just entertain, but heal, restore, and lift the soul. So if you felt something today, a tear, a memory, a little more hope than you had before, don't leave without subscribing. Hit that like button, leave a comment, tell us where you're watching from and what part of the story stayed with you. We read every word, and most of all, stay, because here stories aren't just told, they make hearts rise.